It's Topic Lake Insights presents Regulation Rangers.
Making sense of rules that shape our world.
I'm Julian Cross.
And I'm Elena Harper.
We've got a lot to cover today, fresh from the January 16th Federal Register.
A whole slew of new regulations.
Impacting everything.
From the food we eat.
To the tech we use.
That's right. And it's not just about understanding the rules themselves.
Right.
But what they really mean for businesses, researchers, and all of us. Just trying to navigate daily life.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. The Agricultural Marketing Service. You know the folks who make sure your dairy products are up to snuff. They've issued a final rule about how dairy plants record their butterfat testing.
This is interesting because it allows for more flexibility in where those tests can be done, either in-house at the dairy plant or at an independent certified lab. But the key thing here is no matter where the testing happens, those records have to be available for USDA inspectors. It's all about transparency and ensuring those milk labels are accurate.
Okay, so more options for the dairy producers, but with increased accountability. I like it. Now let's shift gears to the Bureau of Industry and Security. They're all about controlling exports, especially when it comes to sensitive technology. They've actually got two new regulations we need to unpack.
The first one deals with laboratory equipment and biotechnology. It's designed to address concerns about what's called dual-use technology stuff that can be used for legitimate scientific purposes, but also potentially for things that threaten national security.
So like a really fancy microscope that could also be used to analyze something you shouldn't be analyzing.
Exactly. So this regulation tightens up the export controls on certain types of biotech equipment to prevent that kind of scenario, and it's already in effect. Then there's another final rule focusing on advanced computer chips. Remember all those supply chain issues we had?
Oh, yeah. Couldn't get my hands on a graphics card for months.
Well, this new rule is all about making sure those crucial chips don't fall into the wrong hands. It implements extra due diligence steps for exporters to verify who's buying these powerful chips and what they'll be used for. Again, trying to keep that cutting-edge technology from being used in ways that could harm national security.
Makes sense. It feels like a lot of these regulations are walking a tightrope between fostering innovation and, not accidentally giving away the keys to the kingdom. Speaking of which, the Commerce Department, specifically NOAA, the folks dealing with oceans and atmosphere, they've got some new rules too.
Right, and one of them is about protecting marine mammals during Navy training exercises off the coast of Hawaii and Southern California. The Navy uses sonar and other equipment that can impact these animals, so NOAA has to set limits and monitoring requirements to minimize the harm. It's a delicate balance between national defense and environmental protection.
I can only imagine the negotiations that went into that one. What's the other NOAA regulation about?
This one's about expanding a protected area in the Pacific Ocean, the Papahānaumokuākea National Marine Sanctuary. This place is teeming with unique coral reefs, endangered species, and cultural sites. By officially designating it as a sanctuary, NOAA is putting stricter rules in place about fishing, research, and any kind of activity that could impact the ecosystem.
So basically creating an underwater national park. I'm all for that. But let's switch gears again from the ocean depths to light bulbs.
You got it. The Energy Department has clarified the rules about how to test those new energy-efficient general service lamps. You know, the ones replacing the old incandescents?
Yeah, I actually just replaced all the bulbs in my house with those curly ones.
Well, this regulation gets into the nitty-gritty of how to accurately test their light output, making sure they meet energy efficiency standards without being classified as colored lamps.
Sounds pretty technical, but I guess it's important to have those clear standards in place. Now, let's talk about the EPA. Those are the folks making sure our air and water are safe.
And they've been busy. One final rule streamlines the process for approving new methods of testing for contaminants in drinking water.
So faster approval of more accurate tests? That seems like a good thing.
It definitely is. It means we can get better data on those tiny but potentially harmful things lurking in our water and take action faster if needed.
Okay, good to know my tap water is in good hands. What else is the EPA up to?
Well, they're also tackling air quality. They've approved a request from Montana to tweak their air quality plan for Missoula.
Missoula, Montana. What's going on there?
They're actually doing pretty well on air quality and asked to remove a requirement for using special oxygenated fuels in gasoline during the winter. The EPA looked at the data and agreed, so this change makes their plan a bit more flexible while still keeping the air clean.
Interesting how these regulations are often tailored to specific local conditions. It's not just a one-size-fits-all approach. Now, what about the Health and Human Services Department? They deal with a whole range of things, from healthcare to social services. What's new with them?
They've got some important updates, especially for anyone working for the federal government. One new rule revises the guidelines for drug testing in federal workplaces.
Oh, so this is about what substances they test for and how they do the tests.
Exactly. They've updated the list of drugs included in both urine and oral fluid tests and made some changes to the terminology used in lab reports. This actually won't go into effect until July, giving everyone time to adjust.
Makes sense. What else is happening over at HHS?
They've also made changes to privacy rules for certain records kept by the National Institutes of Health, specifically those maintained by the NIH police.
So this is about how they handle sensitive information and ensure those records are protected.
Precisely. It's all about balancing transparency with the need to keep certain information confidential.
Okay, so some important updates for federal employees and researchers. And finally, let's talk taxes. I know not everyone's favorite subject, but the Internal Revenue Service part of the Treasury Department has a new proposed rule that could impact businesses.
Right. This one focuses on what are called corporate separations and other related transactions, basically, when companies restructure spin-off parts of their business or do other fancy financial maneuvers.
Sounds complicated.
It can be, which is why the IRS is proposing to require companies to report these transactions over multiple years, not just in a single year.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, it's all about making sure companies are paying their fair share of taxes and preventing them from using these transactions to avoid taxes they rightfully owe. By having a multi-year view of these deals, the IRS can get a clearer picture and ensure everything is on the up and up.
So more transparency for the IRS and potentially more paperwork for businesses. That's a lot to take in. We've covered a lot of ground today, from dairy farms to biotech labs to the depths of the Pacific Ocean and even into the realm of taxes.
It just goes to show how these regulations touch nearly every aspect of our lives.
And it's all happening behind the scenes.
Yep.
Most of the time. But it's important to stay informed about these changes because they can have ripple effects that impact us all.
Absolutely. These regulations are constantly evolving, reflecting new technologies, changing priorities, and the ongoing push and pull between different interests. It's a dynamic process, and understanding it can help you make more informed decisions in your own life and business.
Well said. Thanks for breaking all this down for us. It's definitely made me realize just how much these regulations shape the world around us, often in ways we don't even notice.
My pleasure. It's always fascinating to dive into these rules and see how they play out in the real world.
And for our listeners, if you want to explore these regulations in more detail, remember to visit www.topiclake.com. We've got links to all the original documents, plus additional analysis and insights. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.